A couple of years ago, my life completely changed for the worse. I had just moved to a new country and I was working on building my startup, focused on it 120% when it comes along the pandemic. This sort of threw a wrench in my plans like it did for most people in the world. It was really tough because I just moved there, I was already isolated, didn't have too much time to make friends. That in combination with working really long hours, not really knowing what I was doing as a first-time founder, all mixed in with this inability to really express my emotions and share that I was struggling. All of that really created the perfect shitstorm that resulted in some really severe burnout. By the time I realized things were going downhill, it was already too late. I was like eating ice cream every night. I was just downing like way too much coffee. I was starting to experience some pretty serious physical symptoms like shortness of breath, anxiety, these like massive headaches in the center of my forehead, and my body was just screaming at me to stop. I just started bawling just for like an hour and letting out all those emotions and all that stress that I'd been holding. I felt really good on one hand, but on the other hand, afterwards, I was just completely exhausted and I felt like I was just done. From that day on, I couldn't even read a book. My brain felt like jello. Looking at a computer was out of the question. So I was spending most of my days like taking 3-hour naps, eating a bunch of food, and staring out the window like wondering what the hell happened. It took me about 2 to 3 months before I started to regain some of my energy. Now, burnout has many different definitions. I'm just going to stick with a really basic and simple definition from the World Health Organization. They say that burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy.
That's me.
I definitely had all these symptoms and much more. In this video, I want to share a few of the strategies that I used over the 2 or 3 months that I was recovering and what worked for me. And hopefully you can find something here that could be useful for your situation as well. Number 1, just do nothing. If you've just gone through a burnout episode, especially one that leaves you completely exhausted and floored, the best thing you can do is actually just rest your body. That means like really just doing nothing.
Release yourself of obligation and responsibility and just do nothing.
When I got burnt out the first time, I just went home for like a month and did really nothing, just hung out with my family, played with my dog, and just laid on the hammock staring at the sky. A big mistake would be to go back to work just like after a few days of resting and sort of feeling better and trying to manage your symptoms. The reason is, you haven't fully recovered and it's very possible that you actually just make your symptoms worse and it takes even longer to recover. When I say do nothing, I actually really mean anything that is physically or mentally exhausting, including doing too much exercise or even going to the sauna, which are things that I really enjoyed. I remember going to the sauna and just like actually really feeling terrible after, which is really, rare for me. But when your body is in the state where it's recovering, you do need to let it rest and not have any extra stressors, at least for a few days or even a few weeks. Another one, keto diet. There's some research that shows that the keto diet can actually increase your cortisol, aka stress levels. Dr. Chris Kresser explains why a low-carb diet may be hurting you and in what specific cases. He says, the main hormone that gets dysregulated in adrenal fatigue is cortisol, and cortisol has been shown to increase on a low-carb diet. This means that a low-carb diet is a potential adrenal stressor in susceptible individuals. Combine that with a stressful job, inadequate sleep, and over-exercise, and you've got yourself a recipe for adrenal burnout. Water fasting, which is something I've experimented with, also falls into this category. I remember trying to do a 1 or 2 day water fast after my burnout, and I just felt way worse and got way more stressed. So I definitely don't recommend doing that either. In fact, don't experiment at all right now. This is not the time to be trying a bunch of new things, but just letting your body rest. Number 2, get a therapist. As soon as you start to regain some energy, go find a therapist, because most people get burnt out isn't because of a physical issue, but because of a psychological issue. Honestly, I was a little bit skeptical at first because up to that point in my life, things were going pretty good. I had basically developed a lot of good habits, at least I felt like, physically and mentally. But what really convinced me to get a therapist was when my friend told me that on average, it takes like 3 to 5 years to recover from burnout. And often you'll have multiple burnout episodes after the first one. So when I heard that, I was like, no way, I do not want to go through this experience again. Let me just do whatever it takes to get better. I started off with in-person therapy and actually some group sessions, which were really useful. I remember in one group session, we were practicing getting out different feelings of anger. And so one of the exercises was to pick up a book and just like smash the shit out of it.
I'm always angry.
I remember doing this and it felt really good, but then at the same time, there was a moment of hesitation when I was actually smashing the book, and I felt like I wasn't supposed to be doing this, like I was a little bit ashamed almost. I was encouraged to explore my relationship with assertive anger and trace this feeling of shame around anger back to my childhood when there were some moments where I wasn't able to really express and assert myself, and that sort of got trapped as a negative emotion, which is what I saw playing out in this exercise that I did. Anyways, these are the sorts of insights that you can get from therapy, and they're super beneficial and really crucial to making sure that burnout doesn't happen again. I was doing this in person. Eventually, I switched to using BetterHelp, which is an online therapy platform. They have like thousands of therapists. It's pretty affordable. So I did that afterwards. Honestly, I prefer doing in person, but if you're tight on cash and you don't have access to a therapist where you are, then it's actually a pretty good option. Number 3, make your heart sing. I basically couldn't do anything when I was recovering, so I picked up an ukulele and just started strumming it. I'd actually never played the ukulele before. I used to play the piano, but wanted to play some instrument and just do something that made me feel good, but didn't require too much energy and too much effort. There was something about playing the ukulele that just felt really good, and like, I'm no musician, I'm not very good at it, but it just felt nice to strum and play the strings. Yeah, I felt there was some recovery happening there. If the ukulele is too much, you could also try the Native American flute, which is sort of like the recorder. If you remember playing that instrument in grade school, like that sort of cheap plastic flute looking thing. It's a lot cooler, it sounds a lot cooler than the recorder, and it's actually pretty easy to play. Like, I picked it up in a few minutes. If you don't want to play an instrument, you can also just sing, or really simply, you can just hum. A study out of Nepal found that people who did a 5-minute exercise where they just hummed a Z noise like a wasp and kept their breathing deep were able to decrease their blood pressure and heart rate. It only took about 5 minutes, and that was enough to decrease the stress response. Further studies showed that specifically chanting Om created the most limbic deactivation and decreased sympathetic response. So there might actually be something special about Om compared to other sounds. In sum, whether it's instrument or singing or humming, whatever makes your heart sing, just give it a shot, do something, create something, and see how that feels. Number 4, walking. Even though I love to run and I'm a runner, I really wanted to let my body rest, and my body couldn't handle any strenuous exercise. So instead, I just walked. In fact, there's one meta-analysis study of burnout patients that showed anything more strenuous than walking, like aerobic exercise or strength training, high intensity exercise, all of that did not have any improvement in burnout recovery time. In other words, it's better if you just take it easy. This was a really good time to catch up on podcasts and audiobooks, and I would just spend hours walking around the park and just sort of hanging out and not doing much of anything. Number 5, ice baths. You might have heard of Wim Hof, the funny and sort of crazy Dutch man who climbs mountains shirtless in the freezing cold, swims underneath freezing cold lakes, and just does all sorts of really crazy stuff basically in the cold. And I've actually been practicing a lot of his techniques for several years, including the cold immersion plus the breathing techniques. And I found that specifically the cold immersion was really, really helpful to manage my stress and to help me recover. Every once in a while, I buy a few kilos of ice from my local 7-Eleven, fill up my bathtub, and switch on my favorite Enya track as I lay submerged in freezing goodness. So how does this work? Well, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your nervous system responsible for resting and digesting and sort of balancing your system out, is activated by the vagus nerve, which is located at the base of your neck. There's actually a few studies on this already, and here's one that found specifically that applying cold on your neck was enough to trigger this vagal response. The results confirmed our main hypothesis that cold stimulation at the lateral neck region would result in higher heart rate variability, which is a good thing, and lower heart rate than in the control condition. In other words, if you're taking a cold shower or a cold bath, make sure to submerge your neck. If you want some more in-depth strategies on how to do breath work and the ice baths, you can of course check out Wim Hof's videos. I also write a lot more about this in my Substack, which you can check out here. Number 6, get some sunshine every day. So cortisol follows your circadian rhythm, peaking in the morning and then going down in the evening before bed. Getting your circadian rhythm back into balance has actually been shown as really important for burnout recovery. Now, I was living in the Netherlands at the time, which has actually 250 hours less sunlight per year than Tokyo does, where I live now. So on the many days when it was cold and rainy and I couldn't get any sunshine, I opted to use a combination of vitamin D supplements, about 5,000 IUs per day, and also sit in front of my red light panel for 10 to 15 minutes. Red light therapy, also known as photobiomodulation, has been shown to have antidepressant properties in patients with major depressive disorder and anxiety. There are less studies on burnout, to be honest, but there's a lot of crossover in symptoms, and personally, I felt warm, fuzzy, and just in a better mood for the rest of the day when I did this. Number 7, get a feline friend. Pet therapy is actually a major in college now and is pretty well studied. When it comes to burnout and pet therapy, honestly, I couldn't really find any great studies, but we know that playing with a pet can alleviate anxiety, symptoms of depression, also release oxytocin, which helps you feel more connected. So I think there's enough crossover with burnout, since burnout has traits of both. So I think it's not a stretch to say that a pet can help you in your burnout recovery. I think it certainly did with mine. There's also a bit of unexpected benefit that I didn't think about. My cat Clooney really demanded my attention, and maybe if you already have kids or pets, this isn't really surprising to you, but for me, basically when I would be working, he would just come and start meowing and purring, and I would be forced to take a break, and I'd have to go and play with his string or his mouse or whatever. And having that periodically, like every hour, every 2 hours, was I think really good for my mental health. And later on, we got a dog, so now I have to walk the dog a couple times a day. And I think these sort of planned breaks really help for any sort of workaholic tendencies that I have. Well, that about wraps it up. I hope you found this useful. I would love to hear from you if you are going through burnout or if you've already had burnout. If any of these techniques have worked for you, or if you have other techniques that you want to share, then please do so in the comments below. I'm going to be making a lot more videos about burnout soon. So if this is a topic that you're interested in, please don't forget to hit subscribe. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks.